Hi gardeners, I'm Lourdes for Native Plant Channel. Today I'm taking you on a tour of what's in bloom in August so that your garden can look great in August too. I'm excited to share with you this plant behind me, which is a Coreopsis. We tend to think of Coreopsis as the low growing plants, but they come in tall sizes as well. This plant is Coreopsis Gold Standard. I purchased it a year ago, so it's a very young plant in my garden. And I purchased it because Mount Cuba Center rated it well for its performance and disease resistance. As you can see, it is completely covered in these beautiful yellow blooms. The spectacular display of blooms is amazing. When I purchased it, I purchased 3 of these plants. I want to show you the other 2 because they got way taller than this one. I'm 5'3", so take a look at how tall this one is, and I'm really impressed with the flowers on it and also all the other ones, all the buds that have yet to bloom. Here's the 3rd plant. You can see those little yellow flowers. This is about 9 foot tall, even though it's described as being 6 to 7 foot tall. And as the month of August went on, it just continued to be covered in more and more yellow blooms. Coreopsis is hardy in zones 3 to 8, and this should be blooming well into September. It tolerates clay soils or dry soils. It tolerates drought and shallow rocky soils. And I understand that you're supposed to divide it every 2 to 3 years in order to keep it robust. Over here, you're going to see a vine, our native honeysuckle, coral honeysuckle. This puts on a really huge show in May with these beautiful orange flowers, and it attracts hummingbirds. So if you're looking for a vine, try coral honeysuckle. There is a video on Native Plant Channel dedicated to only how to grow this plant and to its characteristics, so please check Native Plant Channel for the video on coral honeysuckle. Next to it, you have the beautiful shrub summersweet, also called sweet pepperbush. This is a magnet for all kinds of pollinators. Summersweet is very adaptable, growing in average soils to moist soils. In fact, it will grow in wet areas next to streams. It just smells heavenly. One of the best reasons to have it, besides all the pollinators it attracts, is just the fragrance that it will fill your garden with. It also grows to about 8 feet high, although there are cultivars that will only grow about 3 feet high. Summersweet prefers full sun, but is still a shrub that will produce some blooms in rather shady areas. As you watch this, with the combination of plants in different places, you're probably noticing all kinds of different bees flying around as I move the camera. And on this arbor, I have more coral honeysuckle. This one has come back. If you see the video on this, you know that I had to shear this back earlier because it was having problems with aphids earlier in the season. But it certainly has grown back, and you'll see some blooms over here. Just a wonderful vine. Here below the Coreopsis, you'll have little blue stem, a very important native grass that supports the butterflies of many skippers. They use this and their caterpillars grow on it. As you can see, it's got these attractive blue-green leaves. Sometimes they have sometimes they have a very erect habit like this one. Others are more rounded, but I find them just architecturally beautiful in the garden. Now let's swing around and see what else we have here in bloom. This pearly everlasting. Now, if you look back, you'll know that if you look back at the July video, what was blooming in July, you'll know that this has been in bloom since July. It adds a nice airy feel to the garden. Just these little white flowers, and also an important plant for butterflies as it is the host plant for the American lady caterpillar. Another pollinator magnet is Anaphalis. This has been in bloom since July. You'll see that in my video of the July blooming plants, and it's just absolutely amazing. It is fragrant and it is deer resistant. Here's a plant with a beautiful blue color and an interesting history. This is great blue lobelia, and a Native American nation in Iowa used it as a love medicine in order for couples to avoid divorce, which is pretty interesting considering that other researchers have found it to be potentially toxic and that it can often cause vomiting. So that's pretty interesting. It is a great plant also for those of you with shady areas, as it prefers part shade and can grow in a pretty good deal of shade. It prefers average to damp soils. So if you have wet soils, here's one for you to try. It attracts pollinators, and as you can see here with the butterflies, grows normally till about from 18 inches to 2 feet tall. However, under the right conditions, it can get even taller, particularly if you have moist conditions. So again, great blue lobelia. It's a short-lived perennial. It'll live 3 to 4 years, but does reseed quite easily. So as long as you have it, you probably will continue to have it in your garden. The shrub next to the great blue lobelia is spicebush, and I'm showing it to you not because it blooms in August. It doesn't. It blooms early, very early in the spring, but because you can see here that the leaves are chewed. It's an important shrub that does well in shade to part shade, and it is the host plant for the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. So you do want to have chewed leaves in your garden. For those of you who love purple like I do, a fantastic tall growing plant is New York ironweed. This one is just getting started here blooming and will go on into September. The color just can't be beat. It does grow about 6 foot tall, and it also is very attractive to butterflies. You're going to be able to see a lot of little pollinators on it right now, just very tiny ones buzzing around. But as it begins to bloom even more, you'll get a wider variety of butterflies on it. Although ironweed can get tall, you can keep it more compact by cutting it back in half in late spring. It grows in average to moist soils in full sun. However, after some time, after it's well established, it will tolerate drought. You can deadhead it to reduce the abundance of seedlings you might get, especially if you have a small garden. By using native plants, you are being a good land steward. So thank you so much for what you're doing to make our ecosystems function better. Here is little wood oats. Lovely grass that has these beautiful seed heads, and if you might remember it from the July video when it had already produced these seed heads, which have now continued into August, and it will be in September where they will start turning buff colors, and later on in the season be eaten by the birds. Now, it does reseed prolifically, and it likes damp areas, although it will grow also in average soil. Another advantage for those of you with shade gardens is that it does grow well in shady areas as well as in full sun. The plants you are seeing now do not grow in my garden, but in those of friends. What would summer be without sunflowers? Although many gardeners have grown our annual sunflowers, recognize that those tend to get too tall and in heavy storms or rainstorms can easily fall over. However, our perennial native sunflowers don't have that problem. They will live for a long time. They'll grow in average to dry soils and in full sun to part shade. And as you can see, the pollinators love them. Now, if you do have a somewhat wetter spot, there is swamp sunflower that will provide the same benefits for you. And again, these are long blooming well into September. One of the best plants you can have in your garden to support pollinators are goldenrods. Some of them begin blooming as early as mid-July, while others, or most, will actually bloom from September into October. A lot of times we are familiar with monarchs using them at the end of the fall on their migration. Now, the fantastic thing about goldenrods is that they support so many native bees that really need them and do not use other plants. They have spectacular gold color, and their leaves are food for over 100 species of butterflies and moths. If you have a shady area, wreath goldenrod or zigzag goldenrod do well in shady areas. And if you're looking for the most aggressive one, you would use Solidago canadensis. But if you don't want an aggressive one, then avoid that one. Black-eyed Susan is a familiar summer star. This plant is just gorgeous and it blooms for a long time, going from summer well into the fall. It is just so wonderful to have this plant. It also, of course, brightens up meadows, and it'll brighten up any garden, staying short and looking lovely all the time. How about adding some white flowers to your garden? Here you have common boneset, which grows 4 to 6 foot tall and spreads 3 to 4 feet. It does well in full to part sun and is very adaptable to soil conditions from sandy soils to clay soils. It will grow in average to wet soils, although again, it is adaptable to drier conditions. In nature, it is generally found growing in some of the wetter soils. Here's another plant that the butterflies just love. This is Joe Pyeweed. It can grow from 4 to 7 feet tall in full sun. It will flower from end of July into August and into September. It can grow in average to wet soils and will tolerate heavy clay soils. Joe Pye is also fragrant, and I just love this pinkish rosy color of its blooms. What a great plant. Here you have the curiously named obedient plant, so called because when you bend the individual flowers, they temporarily stay in place, but only for a few seconds. It grows in full sun in average to moist soils, and it will tolerate heavy clay. It can grow 3 to 4 feet high and spread 2 to 3 feet. The flowers come in pink to lavender shades, and they also come in white. It has these lovely snapdragon-like flowers. It can bloom into September, will bloom for about 6 weeks. However, it is not obedient when it comes to how it spreads, because it spreads by seeds and rhizomes, and particularly in wet areas can be quite a bit aggressive. Although it is a member of the mint family, which you would expect it to be deer resistant, it is not. The deer do like this plant. However, a lovely plant for your garden. And of course, our stellar garden phlox has been in bloom since July. The July video goes into more detail on garden phlox, and I urge you to take a look at that one for more details. I hope that this video has helped you select new native plants you'd like to try in your garden. Please subscribe and look for Native Plant Channel on Facebook, where you can find additional information as well. Thanks for everything you're doing. Have a great day.